Thank you for doing this. So hi, Fiona. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time on your house sit.
That's no problem at all.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you've come from and when you started house sitting?
Okay, I'm Fiona Crawford. I lived in Spain for 20 years, near Seville, and while I was in Spain, I was teaching English. Well, my last job was teaching English, and before that, I was translating Spanish to English, mainly horse related, and all alongside I had my horses. I actually went to Spain to buy a horse. And the chap the dealer who sold me a horse offered me a job, and at the time I was going through a divorce, and I had various different work contracts in England. I was teaching riding, working for agricultural colleges, and I was also working for city and guilds. So I was doing a lot of assessing, checking up on colleges and so on, that they were training their students correctly. So I have a background in teaching and in horses. Anyway, at that point, it was a good time to change. And I had in fact been thinking long term about moving to France. So when I was offered the opportunity, I moved to Spain, which was counterintuitive as I didn't speak Spanish, but I now do. Anyway, so I was in Spain for 20 years, and I had a property and I was living with someone, and it wasn't ideal. The property was ideal, the living with someone wasn't. So we put it up for sale, and I decided that when we sold it, he would get some of the profit and I would go back to Britain and do what my brothers and parents had been sort of asking me to do for a while, which was go and help my parents, because they're getting older and they need...
Tell us a little bit about the background there.
Well, they live in Scotland, in Perthshire, on a beef and barley farm. My dad's run it for the last, I don't know, since I was 7, really. So quite a long time, you know, almost 50 years, I suppose. Can it really be that long? Anyway, he's 82 and my mum's 81, so he's been retired for a while, and they now have a kind of share thing with another farm. I'm not sure how it works. One of my brothers is the accountant, and my brothers own the farm, basically. I don't. But they both live in the south of England with families, and okay, I lived in Spain, but without family, and I had always said, well, you know, I could go back and help my parents when it was needed. So that was the idea, was that I'd do that. And I thought that, well, why not on the way visit Spain? I've lived there for 20 years and never seen any of it. And then I thought, well, you know, France is on the way as well, so I might as well visit France too.
So where did you live in? When you lived in Spain for 20 years, where did you live?
I lived 50 kilometers north of Seville,
right,
in the middle of nowhere, near a small village called El Ronquillo in the province of, no, I lived in the province of Seville, but we were the last village before you got to Huelva. And so this was a property that actually the chap who'd offered me the job found. So it was mine. But we extended it. We bought a bit of extra land, and basically I bought it because I wanted to keep horses. But over the 20 years, we've had pigs and sheep and goats and chickens and turkeys and geese and quail and duck and dogs and cats.
That's quite a stock holding there.
Yeah, well, we didn't have all of them all at the same time. We almost always had pigs because that was something you did.
You have a lot of experience with all kinds of animals by the sounds of it, not just from your family farm growing up with cattle, but horses in your professional life, and then having your own sort of small holding with all these different types of animals.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I can't do is milk goats. I tried. Believe me, I tried, because I can milk cows, I can milk horses. I just could not do the goats. I don't know why. It's a special technique, I think, and it just didn't work. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience with a lot of animals. But yeah,
which you obviously enjoy. What else do you love about the house sitting?
it's a great way to see somewhere you've never been. You're enmeshed in, well, you can be what you want. It depends where you go. Most of my house sits have been in the country, in the middle of nowhere. So you don't get really involved in the community because they're in the middle of nowhere, because that's what I like. But it's also where the bigger animals are, and also because I have a motorhome, I can park. Now, if I'm in the middle of Paris, for example, I'm going to have a problem parking my motorhome. The house sitting, I can be in the countryside where I like. You take the dogs for a walk, or if there aren't any dogs, you go for a walk. A better time of year, there were usually lakes or rivers or something that I could jump into when I wanted, because I quite like water. And if it's near the sea, then there's that as well. So, you know, depending on where you are, you adapt to what's around. And the other thing is that I'm not a people person. I like people in short bursts. And if you go and stay with people, you very much have to be with them, because that's why you go and stay with them. Whereas house sitting, you can go to the place, you meet the people, and it's all lovely, and they're lovely to you, and you're lovely to them, and you enjoy yourselves, and then they go away and leave you on your own. So you can do your own thing. I mean, obviously not anything nasty, but you know, you be yourself, you do go for walks, you can work, you can sit on your computer and do your own thing, and you don't have to worry about your hosts.
So it sounds like you are more of a Dr. Dolittle, really. You enjoy the animals. You follow the animals around. You go to houses where there are animals. So it sounds like you're more an animal person than a people person.
Oh, I definitely am. I mean, I have done a couple of house sits where there have not been animals, which is fine as well. But I do miss them. So yeah, I'm much more of an animal person than a people person. And then the ones where there are people around, well, you can get involved in the community. Although, as I say, I have not done that very much. I've been in a couple of villages, but and met a few people, but I don't actively go out and seek them, whereas a lot of house sitters do. The other thing about house sitting is that I'm really learning where I like. You know, where I'd like to live. I mean, I've always known I'd like to live in the middle of nowhere. So that's a given. But every time I come across water, I immediately get this big grin across my face.
How have you sustained your house sitting lifestyle so far? Because you've been house sitting for a little while, haven't you?
Yes, I finished my contract teaching, because I was teaching at an academy in Seville, and that contract came to an end at the end of June last year, the academic year, and that's when I started house sitting. I sold the property in April, so there was 2 months that I rented somewhere meanwhile, and basically I've been self-funding up until now. I am trying to get a business off the ground. I have got 2 students that I teach English, although for the last 2 or 3 months they've sort of disappeared for a while. I think, you know, they were rather busy at Christmas. I specialize in teaching people how to pass the Cambridge exams, specifically the first certificate and the CAE. But I do teach, anyone who wants to be taught. I generally don't teach children. I did teach some children at the academy, no problem, but I definitely prefer adults who want to be there. And I prefer exam students because they know what they want to do and where they want to go. And I'm good at teaching them, and I'm good at getting them to pass exams. I have a high percentage pass rate, but it's pretty limited. So I'm trying to build up the teaching side. And also I spent about 10 years full-time translating Spanish to English. And since I started teaching again, which was about 6 years ago, I've been translating part-time. So I do translations, and my boss from the translations reckoned I was her best proofreader. So I started trying to specialize more in proofreading. And I'm aiming more at the online marketers, internet marketers, and specifically at the non-native English speakers, because although a lot of actually native English speakers need a lot of help with their proofreading as well, you will notice if you look at the internet, the non-native ones know they need the help, whereas the native ones don't. They think they're fine. And so they want to, they want their copy to look professional and good. So, they ask me to do it. So I have started with that as well. And I've got a couple of people that I do that for, and I'm trying to branch out more with that. But also that's one side of the business, which has to do with language. The other side of the business has to do with travel. Travel and lifestyle, because that's what I'm really, really passionate about, shall we say. I mean, I love language, but I'm passionate about lifestyle and a healthy lifestyle and getting out there and doing what you want to do. You don't have to travel if you don't want to, but if you do want to, fantastic, do it, and in the last 2 years, about 2 years ago, I had been seeing a chiropractor once a week because I have issues. When I was just around 22, I was in Austria. I lived in Austria for 2 years. So when I was in Austria, I managed to fall asleep at the wheel and jumped a ditch, broke my back, woke up in time to stop the car about this much before a cliff face, but I broke my back. So that has ongoing issues. I'm extremely lucky because I'm not paralyzed. I'm walking, I'm pretty fit and healthy and fine. And I've spent my life riding horses, which most people who've broken their back cannot say. And then when I was about 28, I had an accident with a horse, which fell on top of me, and I broke my pelvis in 6 places. So I have issues with my back and pelvis, which riding hasn't helped. When I gave up riding about 6 years ago, since then it has improved, definitely. But I have also noticed on this journey that traveling north and getting wetter and colder, it's not improving, it's getting worse again. But I had been seeing a chiropractor every week for quite a while. And 2 years ago, he decided to emigrate to London, which was great for him. And he's really, done a lot better in London than he was doing in Seville. But it meant that I didn't have my chiropractor anymore. He was a chiropractor, physiotherapist, masseurs, a bit of everything. And at that point also, it was just coming into summer and I started swimming again in the pool. And I thought, right, I'm going to really start doing exercises in the pool to try and help me get fitter, lose weight. I was very overweight, having given up riding. And and so I wouldn't need the chiropractor. So I started inventing all these exercises in the pool, tying elastics to my ankles and tying the other end of the elastics to a post at the far end and doing things. And it worked. And I also started thinking, well, if I'm going to do this, I better start losing weight as well and see to my diet. But the main thing at that point was getting myself fitter. And I got myself pretty fit and really supple.
Tell us about house sitting. Tell us about your current house sitting assignment. I know it's a short one, but it's also in France.
Very.
A little bit about what appealed to you about it and what you're enjoying about it.
Okay, well, this current one started yesterday. I was house sitting literally 20 minutes just the other side of the village that's near here. And I had seen this house sit advertised for several months on your site. And I kept seeing it and thinking, well, you know, it's sort of in the area I want to be. And then I was at this other one and I realized where it was, because up until then I hadn't realized quite how close it was. And it was basically, they had advertised saying they wanted to get away for 2 or 3 days, sometime between January and April, I think they put. And I hadn't really considered it at all because it was only 2 or 3 days, and I don't do house sits that are so short. I generally want at least 10 days, although the last one was 8, because settling in and then moving and settling in, it's a little disturbing and disrupting.
For house sitters to say they prefer 2 to 3 weeks, just in order to be able to settle and enjoy the area and so on. So I understand that.
Exactly. One, it's enjoying the area, and 2, it's settling, and 3, it's getting down and being able to actually do some work. Which, if you're there for 2 or 3 days, moving in and moving out and all the rest and all the travel, it just, it doesn't usually work. But then I saw that this one was so close. I thought, well, it really isn't a major problem for me to do it. Also, the next house that I have is in about 3 weeks' time. Between the 2, I'm going to visit a friend, and I had no absolute set dates to visit her. So I thought, well, actually, I could do this. So I thought, well, it looked like a nice place, and it was, as I say, close to where I was. So I contacted them and said, look, if you still want someone, I could do this as long as it's starting on yesterday and for 2 or 3 days. And so they got back to me and said, well, we're going to contact the people we want to go and see if they can do that. But in principle, yes. So it all worked out fine. I had to leave the house sit I was at before the owners came back, which wasn't the original plan, but they were happy about that. So I'd obviously contacted them to ask. They were happy about that, and so here I am, and it is a beautiful place. In fact, I'd sort of checked it out on the Friday. I'd already agreed to do the house sit, but on the Friday I had already planned to go to a nearby village to see the village, because it was a really nice village, but also it was their market day. That was why it was Friday, and I had to more or less pass here to get there. So I thought, well, I'll just have a quick look. So I had sort of checked out where it was on Friday, which meant that when it came to coming yesterday, I could come straight like that, and there was no problem getting lost or anything. So it's the sort of place that I love. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's by a stream, so I've got my water. Well, actually, it's more of a river. In the summer, I would definitely be straight in there. This time of year, I'm debating it seriously, because especially streams tend to be colder than lakes as well. And yeah, they have one close neighbor. No, they have 2 close neighbors, although one of them lives in Paris most of the time. But when I say close, it's probably half a mile away. And then the nearest village is 1 kilometre and a bit. I actually almost walked to it this morning. I am going to walk to it this afternoon because I want to visit it, because it looked really pretty when I drove through it on Friday. And then the the nearest big village where there are shops and things is 10 minutes. I mean, it took me 10 minutes in my motorhome. So, you know, it's the sort of place I love. You're secluded and no one's going to bother you. It's a lovely house. They've done a lot of work to it since they bought it. I gather that one end of it was originally built into the rock face, and when they moved in, it was the water was leaking through the rock face into the room. So they had the rock face dug away, and the house is now actually separate. It's separated by the width of a car, so they can drive the car around, but it's completely dry. It's my bathroom, and it's fine. No, I mean, obviously there's water in it because it's a bathroom, but you know, it's fine. And the house is beautiful. The dogs are lovely. One of them is very staid and gentle, and the other one is somewhat lively and has a tracker on his collar so that if he does run off, you can find him. And yeah, you know, it's a very nice place. Not all the huge number of animals, which is just as well when I'm only here for 3 days. But very, you know,
with the dogs.
Yes, and the sort of place that I like to be anyway. So
wonderful. Well, it really sounds like, from everything you've told us, that you love everything about house sitting. Obviously the animals, obviously discovering new locations, the properties, but kind of just being in a place. It sounds like that gives you a sense of not just adventure and satisfaction, but it breathes life. I mean, you really seem very happy. You seem a happy person enjoying what you're doing, which I have to say, as someone, you know, who runs HouseSit Match, absolutely thrilling to hear. So I want to thank you for sharing all of that. And so just one last question, if I may. How much longer do you think you'll be continuing to do house sitting? I know you've told us you're aiming to return to Scotland for obvious reasons, but you might sample house sitting later on for little breaks here and there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm planning on doing while I'm looking after my parents, I'm planning on doing two things. I'm not planning on selling my motorhome, which means that I can go off for a few days here and there if I want to. But I also would like to continue doing house sitting a bit. In Britain, I could do paid house sitting as well. So I will look at both sides, the paid and the non-paid. But obviously, if I wanted a couple of weeks holiday, but you know, a couple of weeks in Italy, I could look at the house sit sites and see if there's somewhere that I could, you know, look after their property as well, and it would be great. And I could then either, if it was a couple of weeks, I'd probably fly in. If it was going to be longer, then I might take the motorhome and I might not. It really depends on my parents, because as they are at the moment, my dad had major scares last year and I almost put off this whole odyssey. I offered to my mum and she said no, it would just increase her stress even more if I didn't do this, because I'd been looking forward to it for so long. But he's now much better. And as long as they stay like that, yes, I can go off and have holidays. I can't go off for a year, but I can, you know, go off and do things. Once they need me more, then it's going to be more time. But yes, I want to continue doing the house sitting. We haven't actually talked about the way I'm mixing it with the motorhoming, but for me, that works out really well, because when I'm house sitting, I don't go and see many places. I do go and see the odd place when I'm house sitting, but I don't see much. And then when I'm motorhoming, I tend to be going to a different place every day. Sometimes I even go to 2 places in one day, which is too much for me. I don't like towns anyway, but when I get to a town, I generally only want to be there for 2 or 3 hours because I don't like them. So what I've been doing is spending some days motorhoming and then the house sitting. And the house sitting is a rest from the motorhoming. But I do enjoy seeing these places for a short time. You know, it's really interesting. And some of the places are fabulous. And some of them, you know, they're small villages medieval villages and, you know, really beautiful and places I've always wanted to see. And if you're house sitting, you can't go that far away. Whereas if you're motorhoming between the house sits, you can visit all sorts of different places. So it fits together very well.
Well, it sounds like you've made it a very useful, practical, but also enjoyable combination for yourself as a single house sitter, using your motorhome in between the sits, but also to take you a little bit further, more adventure. I mean, I have to say, I really admire you. That's just fantastic. Fiona,
Well,
very much indeed for sharing all of that with us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to your blog.
thank you. I look forward to getting it really started.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.